No, 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 no. No, it's nice to meet you. It's always good to talk football. I enjoy it. Obviously, it's been a massive part of my life. So, and still involved at a very good level. Had a new experience last week with the first team, the EFL and Championship players. So you're always learning things. Always keep yourself open, your ears open, take things on board, and dissect the good, the bad, and the indifferent. So yeah, absolutely. I had a great week last week, and fantastic, to see Ruben, after one camp with us. But, over a period of time, we've been watching him and monitoring him. He fully deserves this opportunity. He made a good impact at Cardiff, obviously, of late. A different type of player. I mean, a tall, big, 6'4". I mean, he's got a real modern day athletic football frame, allied with fantastic, great feet, great ability. You sometimes associate perhaps big lads who are a bit clumsy or not a good touch, but that's certainly not the case with Ruben, for sure.
And was it always going to be training, going into coaching for the youth academies or under 21 levels for you? Was it always going to be that target after your playing career?
Well, yeah, I was interested. I mean, I worked with quite a number of good managers and some not so good, shall we say. But that's part of football. You enjoy working for some managers. I was lucky enough, when I came to Swindon, well, Len Ashurst, first of all, I thought my first manager at Newport, the discipline, the hard work that was required from sort of Len, that's been instilled in me from day one. And then as I moved through sort of various clubs, coming to Swindon, Lou Macari, direct football, didn't particularly enjoy that type of football. But again, an honest man, made people work so hard in training. His values of fitness were undoubted. It was a different type of fitness to what we do nowadays. I mean, it was 5 mile, 6 mile road runs on a Thursday. I mean, you would never, ever do that now. So in terms of changing the type of training, I mean, Luke tried to continue to do that when he went to West Ham and I think Birmingham and Stoke and Celtic, and it just didn't work with the top players. For me, that's not the way to work. And then after Lou Macari, I worked with Ozzy Ardiles, so it was a total contrast. An Argentinian World Cup winner came to Swindon after a great career in England with Tottenham. One of the nicest men you'd ever meet in football. And his favourite words were play, play, play. And literally, we played out from the back. The supporters didn't take to it initially because with Lou, it was get it forward as quick as you can and get the ball into the opposition box. With Ozzy, it was a more productive, slower approach to play, but very, very successful. And then after Ozzy, I went to Crystal Palace for a while under Steve Coppell and Palace, who were doing really well at that time. And then I came back to Swindon under Glenn Hoddle. And Glenn Hoddle was probably the best manager that I've worked with in terms of everything, not only about playing out from the back, but tactically aware, the dietary things he put in place, looking after yourself. And I was coming up to sort of late 20s then. And we used to practice simple passing. And I thought, if Glenn Hoddle's got to practice simple 5, 10, 15-yard passing, then we've all got a long way to go, because his passing was incredible. I mean, left foot, right foot, outside of the foot, inside the foot, both feet. He was phenomenal. And he kind of really inspired me. I played on for a few more years. I went to Reading after that. But Glenn was probably my biggest inspiration in terms of going into coaching. So it was around that time. I was coming up to my 30s, early 30s, and I thought, yeah, I'll get into coaching. I didn't know what kind of level or where I'd end up. It was a case of just getting your badges and learning from a lower level. And then I went straight into a player manager role at Bath City when I was about 34. So I thought I wanted to continue playing because I still enjoyed and still felt I had something to offer on the pitch. It was Dr. Martin's level, which is probably a bit like Conference South at the moment. And I really enjoyed it, working with players. It was my first introduction. I'd done my badges, as I said, but just to manage a club. Bath was a pretty historic club at that kind of level. and I had 3 really good years. I really enjoyed it. By then, I got my A license, and Bath's finances were pretty precarious. So I left there and I went back to Swindon to work with the under 17s, as it was. It was an under 17s, 19s, a 3-year scholarship. So I got back to the club where I'd spent, quite a big part of my career, and sort of helped develop the younger players there. And I still didn't know whether I would want to go back into senior men's football, or perhaps I was more of a development coach. I mean, when you look back now, I suppose I had a year with Pagey at the senior level at Port Vale, but predominantly I have been a more of a development coach. And I suppose having done it for 25 years, that's probably where I see my future at.
You have been part of many players in development with Wales. I mean, the list can go on, and you see most of the players now being called up for the Wales senior team, and they're making a big name for themselves. I mean, it must be a thrill for you to see that happening, where you go, those are my boys that I've helped develop, and I'm very proud of that. I mean, when you see maybe the likes of, let's say, Nico Williams or Joe Roden or something like that, or any player that's played under you to go on to the senior squad, how does that make you feel? And it must be a big thrill for you.
Well, it is. No, absolutely. We obviously don't take full responsibility. Predominantly, the work is done at their clubs. We only get the players 5 times a year, if we're lucky, on international breaks. But all we try and do is encourage them to improve, guide them along the Welsh pathway, give them an opportunity, a stage to play on, and just watch them develop. And my first camp was 2012, Malta home at Dragon Park, to a double header. And, that was Dan James, Joe Morrell, and, that group of players. They were fantastic. Harry Wilson. So, yeah, it was a real great introduction. It was a part-time basis at that time. But these players are, they don't get to the top by luck. They get to the top by real hard work. And as I said, a lot of the clubs, they should take a lot of pride as well. But we certainly do, because when they jump up, you never quite know how a career is going to shape. There's lots of obstacles in the way. Physically, they have to be able to deal with the demands. Mentally, they have to deal with the mental side of it. But yeah, we're kind of a vehicle. And obviously in Wales, we do give players an opportunity. Over the last 10 years, if you're good enough, you will step up into the senior side. And full credit to the managers who've managed over the last year. And beyond that, John Toshak, going back as far as John Toshak, he implemented a younger group working with Brian Flynn, the Aaron Ramseys and Gareth Bales, they were brought in quite early as well. So we haven't got huge amounts of players, and if young players are doing particularly well at their clubs and they come in and they integrate into the intermediate groups, and they've got good personalities and they're good people, we try, and that's one thing we do on camp, is instill a professionalism and a discipline to make sure that they deliver both on and off the pitch, because we think off the pitch is really important. Especially how they deal with people and how they speak to people and how they conduct themselves. So, and I'm all for that. And I bought in, as soon as I came on camp with Geraint back in 2012, I really felt it was kind of a lot of my natural things that I like to instill into players. It was already in place. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. I mean, it's almost 9 years now, and I've enjoyed every moment. We've qualified for a number of tournaments, and the 17s, 19s. And as much as developing, younger groups, it is about personal development. But when you integrate a group of players who have got ability, you will win games and you will qualify for tournaments. And that's happening more and more over the last few years. And long may that continue, because the higher level you can get these young players playing at, then it'll help when they do step up into the seniors. And then when we're trying to qualify or play in European tournaments, it'll help them. There is experience to draw on. So the more, young players that qualify, it'll certainly help them in the future.
You say, with personal development, I wanted to know something with because of Euro 2016. It's like one of the main reasons that a lot of people say that the further we got in the semi-finals with the senior squad, it's down to the fact the majority of the players that played for Wales grew up together through the rankings. One of the things I really want to know is, climbing through ranks, do you think it's very important, considering that you're the Wales under-21 manager, the next step is the Wales senior squad, do you think it's very important to say, right, they know each other, ins and outs, left, right, and centre, all the way through? So do you think it's very important to try and keep the same players going into the senior team to hopefully benefit themselves and also benefit the team from progressing further, and dare I say, could potentially win maybe the Euros and maybe win the, dare I say, the World Cup in the future?
Well, yeah, I mean, like we said, we instill the principles from the top right down through to, the under-16s. There are principles in the Welsh setup that we try and instill. So when they do step up, for example, last week, Ruben, Mark Harris, George Thomas, they've stepped up again, having not been involved as much, but the principles are the same. So they're ingrained from a young age. So when they step up to the senior group, it's not a big shock. It might be a shock looking around the dressing room and seeing the top stars of European and if not world football. So yeah, and then the temperament that they have to have, and like I said, that humanity that they're able to still, Gareth's a human being and he's a fantastic character, as all the rest of the players are. So, and they've got a human side to them. When they see young players coming into that group, they integrate them. There's a great spirit, and as you said, when these players have grown together over such a long period of time, they've got this attitude and this willingness to help each other. Together stronger, the branding. I mean, that's exactly what it is. Everybody's together and everybody gets stronger. And long may that continue. And all these young players that step up into that will be integrated by the great professionals that we've got in that senior group. And, we know there's not an issue when a young player steps up, because these senior players will look after them and really help them to settle into it.
What is your target as a Wales under-21 manager? What is the main key goal for you? I bet a lot of people have asked you this, like, what is the target? What is the main goal? But for you personally, is there a personal achievement for you as a manager, or is there one specific target where it's going to take step by step?
Well, when you're in tough groups and there's generally only one qualifies, it's never, ever easy, and there's probably 5, 6, 7 players who are in the senior group now who could still play in the under-21 team. So when you lose your 7 best players, arguably, then it's not going to be easy to qualify. So the basic target for us, and Jonathan said this to me when I sort of took the role on a couple of years, that, we just got to keep the conveyor belt going for the senior group. And if we can keep helping develop players, if we can keep giving them a platform to play at the highest level, if we can keep instilling the principles, so when they do step up, it's like I said, it's not a vast shock to them. But yeah, and ultimately, as a football man, I want to win games as well, but I want to do it the right way. It's not all about winning, and it's not all about developing. It's still trying to find the right balance. And I think if you get good performances, as we showed in the last campaign, certainly the first game against Belgium, there was 11, 12, 13 with a couple of subs coming on, making a real positive impact. To beat Belgium at home, because we saw when we were diminished away with numbers, and I think I brought 9 and 2003s in, 9 younger players into that because of the players moving up to the senior team. It is a tough task. But when you've got your full group of players, your full squad, we can be very, very competitive, but it's important, the performance, because ultimately we want to see these players playing in the first team. It's the same at the football club. I worked for Swindon for 6 years as a youth team manager before I joined the Welsh setup. And there was nobody prouder than all the staff in the youth academy, or centre of excellence as it was, to see a young player come through from 8, 10 years of age, all the years, and all the staff that they've gone through, and all the support they've had right through, to see him in the first team is a tremendous achievement for everyone. But it is ultimately down to the player to take all the good advice on board, sacrifice many things that a lot of his friends perhaps do, and commit himself to being a young professional footballer. So yeah, so whether you're at a football club or you're in the role I'm at now, and our 17s, 18s, 19s managers, we all feel exactly the same. We're all off the same hymn sheet. We're all trying to produce the next player. You know, Nico didn't play in the 21s because he's done so well at the 19s and at his own club. You know, to step into Liverpool's team last year like he did, Nico, I mean, that just shows you the temperament and obviously the ability, if you're at a club like Liverpool, to break through at a club like that. And the season they had last year, let's not forget how good they were. For him to play the amount of games probably helped because they had so many games and they were in so many cup competitions. But he took the chance. And that's one thing with all young players. You know, they can all go banging the door at their respective clubs and say, oh, well, I've never been given a chance. But if you are given a chance, you've got to be ready, because some managers will give you one opportunity. And I've seen that at Swindon many years ago when I was youth team again. Players did get a chance and they weren't quite ready. So you've got to be ready in every aspect of your game, because managers have to win games at that level, at Football League level, Premiership level. You know, if they lose 3 games, they're under pressure. So young players, for a manager to give a young player in the modern game, they've got to be exceptional, because they can't afford to run the risk of a young player making mistakes and costing the team, valuable points.
Going on to you as when you at Swindon, not just as a coach but as a player. I mean, you've been there for God knows how many years, Swindon Town legend. A lot of people still, I think it's just the modern generation, but it's like if you say a fact about Swindon Town being in the Premiership, right? People go, really? And then you go, yeah, that happened. That really happened. And especially under Glenn Hoddle as well. And you found success there because you had 2 spells there. So in total, it was around about 8 seasons, I imagined, or if not more. So what was it like to gain promotions with Swindon Town, especially in the Premier League? But unfortunately, I think the Premiership, it wasn't the best of seasons, but it was the best experience because it was the Premiership was sort of starting as well. So what was that like for you to be playing in the Premier League and also to be spending a lot of time with Swindon?
Well, it was fantastic. As you say, Swindon's not the biggest club, and unfortunately they've dropped back down to the 2nd division again this year. But it was a progressive club when I joined. Lou Macari was a Manchester United legend, and he joined the club, I think, in about 85. So he kind of raised the profile, from 1,500, 2,000 gates. Lou Macari came in and it sort of doubled to 4,500. And over the next couple of years, they were successful. I joined in 88. So I was kind of joining a club that was quite a progressive club. Lou probably took the club as far as he could. Didn't quite reach the heights of the Premiership. But then Ozzy came in and he was still called the 1st Division then. And we won promotion through the playoffs in 1990, beat Sunderland, but we were demoted. So although we went up to the top division, which was incredible for Swindon, we were demoted because of some financial irregularities. The club stabilised itself. Ozzy moved on to Newcastle. Glenn Hoddle came in. And Glenn was arguably the best manager I've ever worked for in terms of tactically aware, technically how we played, how we trained, and then the dietary situation was changing, the nutrition, how you had to look after yourself, the mental side. Glenn had come from Monaco and he'd seen how it sort of worked in Europe. Glenn was coming sort of to his mid-30s and it was kind of a final chance for him to play as well. And to be on the same pitch as Glenn was incredible. I mean, his passing was second to none. He was phenomenal. But we used to do a lot of basic things. We used to pass simple 10, 15-yard passes, and then we'd practice weight of pass, clipping balls over mannequins into spaces. I mean, it was kind of basic stuff. But the top players make the basics look simple, don't they? And I think Glenn identified that. He worked hard with us, and he got his rewards. The only thing although we only stayed in the Premiership for a year, we did lose Glenn. We won promotion at Wembley. So we lost Glenn. We lost a lad called Dave Mitchell, a striker who was a key player for us. And we lost Colin Calderwood. So Colin went to Spurs, and he went on to represent Scotland thereafter. So we lost 3 key players. And although we tried to replace them, they were exceptional players, and it was never easy. But it was a wonderful ride. We had a really bad start. I don't think we won for 17 games. And it was obviously, looking at Sheffield this year, having done fantastic last year, it was kind of so many similarities. You know, they'd actually played well, and we played well in many, many games. But the clinicalness of the opposition and strikers that most clubs had back then, and they do certainly nowadays, you know, you'd make one mistake and you're 1-0 down, and then the complex of the game changes. You know, you open up to try and get a goal, and then you're 2 down and 3 down. So we took a couple of heavy defeats. The fans still remember it fondly because we had some fantastic performances. I think we went to Man United and drew, we went to Spurs and drew, went to Arsenal and drew. Sheffield Wednesday were one of the top teams that time. So we had some wonderful games, wonderful performances, but we just didn't get enough points. We weren't quite good enough to stay in the Premier League, but it's there in history. You know, the fans, you know, I still live just outside Swindon, and whenever I go into Swindon, people always stop and they're always happy to talk. And obviously I scored the penalty to take us to the Premiership for Swindon in the 4-3 victory. And they always want to talk about it. So, yeah, great memory still, although we did only last one season in the top flight.
Going on to Wales then for the senior team, it was roughly around about 23 caps, scoring 3 goals. How did you feel when you got the call up to come and play for Wales?
Well, I was amazed. I was delighted. You know, when you're a young kid growing up in Cardiff, kicking the ball in the street, you know, it's either FA or it's 1 goal and jumpers down for goalposts in the street I used to live. And you kind of dream about it, but you don't. I certainly didn't think it would really ever happen. And then I went to Newport and had a year there straight from school, and then Len took me to Cardiff. So to play for 2 of my closest clubs was a great honour, great achievement, and I was really proud to do that. And then I got released by Alan Durban at Cardiff. So you know, playing for Wales is probably the furthest thing. The most important thing then is to get back on the horse, find a club, and continue your development. I had a game or 2 for Merthyr, thought maybe that would be the level I might play at. I didn't quite know. But then I decided to take a bit more of a risk, a bit of a challenge. I went to Bath City and played there under a guy called Bobby Jones. He was an old Bristol Rovers winger. Bobby, lovely man. And he really encouraged me to play my natural game and encouraged me to do more things that I wasn't perhaps doing. And I started playing really well consistently, and there was a lot of clubs looking at me. And it was Newport actually that forked out some money in their financial times and took me back to Newport. And that was really the start of a progressive career, which took me on to Swindon. And obviously, as we climbed the tables and moved up close to the Premier, my performances were quite consistent. I think I'd won left back of the year for 2 years running in the 2nd Division / Championship. So I'm starting to think, yeah, things are going quite well. And then I got the call up in 1990. It was just before our first playoff game, actually. There was a game against Costa Rica. I think there was a few injuries. It was the end of the season, middle of Mayish. And it was just before we played our final in the playoff final at Wembley. And Ozzy said, look, go and play. Have a few days away with Wales. It'll be a fantastic achievement for you. And you should be proud. And I was, you know, we played at Ninian Park, which was an old home ground of mine. And it was brilliant, you know, to play against Costa Rica. Fantastic. Some great old teammates. Gary Speed made his debut in the same game, actually. And that's a lasting memory for sure. We won 1-0. And from that point on for 6 years, I sort of kept myself in and around the squad. Some unbelievable players, like we spoke about earlier, about a team spirit. You know, to walk in with players I used to watch on Match of the Day, you know, Rhys, Ratcliffe's, Neville Southall's, Dean Saunders, Mark Hughes. I mean, incredible. And then obviously Ryan came in a little bit later. So I got to know Ryan as well. And obviously he had an incredible career. He was a young 17-year-old on the verge of Man United's team. And he came into the squad. So, yeah, I mean, you've got to have spirit. You've got to have everybody together. if you're going to do anything at international level or any level, you've all got to be pulling the same way and get on. You might not get on, like best friends, but certainly on the pitch, you've got to be able to help each other and cover each other and communicate and guide each other at the right times. And, that happened with me for Wales for sure. Obviously, there was the one period where, I missed the penalty for Wales, and that was a very dark time. But you've got to get over it. I tried to score. I did my best. I'd scored 3 goals previous to the Romania opportunity. So I was confident, but unfortunately, it didn't work out on the day. And, like my penalty for Swindon is etched in history. Unfortunately, the one missed for Wales is etched in history. So nothing I can do about it now other than help all the new generations. And I've been fortunate enough to do that, like I said, for the last 9 years.
When you mentioned about the penalty, I didn't want to ask anything about the penalty because I think a lot of media, a lot of football podcasts and everything have covered it enough. And I think we won't, us being Welsh, we just can't keep going through that pain again.
Thank you.
But, yeah. I mean, I'm nearly 25, and I think, don't get me through that, I mean, but I really want to know something because it's very important to always talk about, it's like the mental health side in football and how important it is and everything. But what I really want to know is after the event, let's just say, did you get a lot of Wales fans sympathizing with you afterwards? And also, how did you bounce back? Because it was such an important penalty, let's just say, and it's such an important game, especially under Terry Yorth as well, who was, it was make or break for him because his contract wasn't being renewed or anything. So what was it like for you to mentally bounce back from that? And also, like I said, how did the fans sympathize with you, ever approach you to say, listen, it's okay,
I think in the main, most people were sympathetic, people who really understand the emotions of the game, the huge game that it was for Wales. The opposition were fantastic. There was a lot of things that came from the game that, we brought it down to basically almost like a cup final. We had to win, they only had to draw, but they were a team full of incredible individuals. Neville always defended me because people were saying I cost the game. Well, Nev unfortunately probably let Hadji's shot in, which normally Nev wouldn't. I missed the penalty and then we conceded another goal. So it was 1-1 when I missed the penalty. We could have perhaps still gone on and won the game anyway. So, you can't blame one person for a defeat, I don't think. And I personally would never do that myself. And I think fans generally were sympathetic. Obviously, there's the odd person. Even straight after the game, I remember walking out to my car and someone was shouting, you're this, that, and the other. But that's, I'm not saying it's acceptable, but I had to take it. I had to take it on the chin. And the one thing, you've got to be strong. My upbringing was from probably a tough place, Llanrummy in Cardiff, a council estate. I think I'm reasonably mentally tough anyway. I've had a couple of free transfers, and when you get a free transfer, you don't know what's happening with your life and your career. They're things which shape your mind and make you strong as well. So yeah, my upbringing, my early career where I got released from my hometown club as well, which was never easy. Cardiff, I thought I'd be there forever, as most players do when they're at a club. So all these things, my wife, and my close family, they're always there supporting. And even at the time, Swindon Town, I went back into training the following day, and John and Glenn were at the game. John Gorman, again, an absolute fantastic man. Still speak to him regularly, even after all these years. And they're there to support you. And I suppose we actually had a penalty on the Saturday. That was a Wednesday night when I missed the penalty. But on the Saturday, we had a penalty against Ipswich in the 80-odd minute. And I took it because the club, Glenn and John said, look, you're our penalty taker still. Don't worry about that. But you do worry, of course you do, because it means something to you. If you didn't worry about it, then, what kind of person are you? Because you have to worry, you have to learn, you have to understand the implications. And I scored on the Saturday. And then I probably scored a couple more before the end of the season. But yeah, it's there and it hurt. And, you know, when you talk about it now, it's disappointing, you know, when the England players missed penalties, Southgate and Pearce, they had an opportunity again in later competitions to perhaps put it to bed. I never quite got that opportunity. But, you know, I've just moved on, as you have to. Found a new career into the coaching side. And as I said, you know, whenever we have penalties, you know, you never heap any pressure on players because you know, taking penalties, and I've watched it for years, you know, whether it's playoffs or just vital penalties in games, you've got to be brave to take it. You know, you've got to be brave to take it. If you're a penalty taker, which I was, and as I said, my record was very good, 3 out of 3, and you do expect to score, but goalkeepers are trying their very best to not allow that. But, you know, this one hit the crossbar. And unfortunately bounced out. So yeah, life is a roller coaster, as I tell everybody. And your football career is a roller coaster. You have your highs, you have your lows. You enjoy the highs for sure, but you can't get too down with the lows. You know they're around the corner. You know, whenever I speak to players individually and we have conversations, and you know, I've spoken to lots of players with injuries over the last few years, give them a call and try and give them a little lift. And a long-term injury, my son, you know, Bill's had 2 cruciate injuries. You know, I can see when he's down and he's in the dark side, and you've got to give him a lift, and you've got to say, look how lucky you are at times. You know, you've had your fantastic moments. And this is one of the darker sides. So we've got to have a balance in life. And don't get too excited when it goes really well, because you never quite know what's around the corner. But you certainly got to enjoy. We're only here once, and you enjoy life to the best you possibly can. But at the same time, you've got to be able to and be ready to deal with some of the negativity that comes your way as well.
Final question of the podcast as well. And I just want to say thank you, Paul, for coming on the show, for letting me speak to you and to do a podcast and everything. It was a really honor to speak to you. How do you look back on your career as a player and maybe potentially as a coach and manager?
Well, I think my career, like I mentioned, you know, I had a few free transfers. When you're 19 and you get released and you just literally don't know what's going to happen next. So to come back from that, to play at Wembley twice, to represent my country, I'm really proud of what I did. You sometimes think, could you have perhaps done a bit more? But you dealt with whatever you dealt with. I felt like I was committed. I sacrificed lots of things. So I was really pleased with my career. It's a shame we didn't, you know, get to the World Cup in America. But again, that's something that we can't do anything about. And my coaching career has gone quite well. I've given lots of help and lots of support at club level. And I've seen lots of players at Swindon go on and make their debuts and have good careers. So that makes me really proud. And as we said at the very start of the interview, you know, in 2012, when I first joined Wales, to see all these young players come through, you know, that gives me great pride and great enjoyment. And to see their faces, you know, stepping out and singing the anthem at wherever it may be, you know, it brings the hairs up on your neck, and really proud for them and their families as well, because, you know, a lot of these boys are fantastic players, but they're good people as well. And I always think if you're a good person, you'll have a good life, and hopefully that will continue.
I just want to say, well, big thank you, Paul, for coming on the Drags Voice podcast to talk about your career, and especially with the Wales U21 squad as well. And I wish you all the very best with the team and the upcoming tournaments as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much. No problem.
Take care.